All right, Alexander, we are going to talk about what's going on in the UK. Dominic Cummings, Boris Johnson. This is more palace intrigue, I guess, or party. Maybe it's not palace intrigue, maybe it's party intrigue, but they're gunning for Boris Johnson. What is going on here?
Well, I think you've described it exactly right. I mean, this is partly, it must be said, Dominic Cummings, who was for a long time Boris Johnson's chief advisor. He's obviously very badly fallen out with Johnson. He's out for revenge. He got sacked in that very strange sort of coup that took place in the autumn of last year. In the run-up to Brexit, he was ousted by a group of Conservative officials and who allied themselves to Boris Johnson's fiancée. And they were able to turn Johnson against him, and he was basically sacked. He was thrown out of the Downing Street operation, and he's out for revenge, and he's spreading these things about Johnson. But I think now, having listened to Cummings, Cummings gave a testimony for 7 hours to a Commons committee about the British government's pandemic response. He was unbelievably critical of Boris Johnson. I mean, off the scale. He was unbelievably critical of the health minister, Matt Hancock. Off the scale. He was obviously trying, and is talking up attempts to try and get these two people out of power. He said that Johnson is unfit to be prime minister. And it was quite obvious to me that he's, to some extent, acting in concert with other people. And it was striking that he went out of his way to speak well of the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, who many people see as manoeuvring for some time now to take over from Johnson. So it looks to me increasingly as if, yes, there is an element of revenge, but also, undoubtedly, there is plotting and there is an attempted coup. And this has been underway now for some time, but it's now reaching a crescendo. If you remember, a couple of weeks ago, we had talk about corruption, about the fact that there were all kinds of corrupt practices going on in Downing Street within Johnson's operation. They've now moved on. The same people have now moved on using Cummings to call into question Johnson's handling of the pandemic. And it's now quite clear that the person that they're trying to put in Johnson's place is the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak.
Why do they want Johnson out? I mean, what is the reason? You said the word coup. I mean, a party, say like a party coup. They want Johnson out. Why? What's the reasoning behind it? They just don't like him? They don't feel he's one of the guys in the crowd? I mean, what's the reason?
Right. There are basically three reasons. Firstly, I mean, it's important to say that in some people's case, like that of Cummings and indeed Sunak himself, there are personal motives. Cummings is out for revenge. Sunak is extremely ambitious. But it's also true to point out that there are two issues about Johnson. Firstly, Johnson is unpopular with many people at the leadership of the Conservative Party. He rose to the leadership of the Conservative Party and became Prime Minister by basically riding the Brexit wave. He endorsed Brexit. He became the public face of the Vote Leave campaign during the 2016 referendum, pushing, by the way, Nigel Farage into the background with the support of the media. He then used that position first to leverage David Cameron, the then Prime Minister, out of office, and then he acted against Theresa May. That has made him deeply unpopular with the very strong Remainer faction within the Conservative Party, which is still there, hasn't all gone away. And it also annoyed and upset other people within the Conservative Party who saw him as an outsider who basically carried out a hostile takeover of the Conservative Party. They don't see him as a trustworthy establishment figure. They needed him for a while to connect with the voters in the Leave voting constituencies, but now they are wanting to see him removed from power because ultimately they think he is unreliable and they don't trust him and they don't see him as one of themselves, a figure of the establishment. There is a third reason, which we shouldn't completely discount, by the way, which is, of course, that there are some people who take these criticisms of Johnson seriously. They do see him as a poor manager and an incompetent prime minister. Johnson has never been known to be a good manager, a strong manager, and his failings as a manager have been obvious right through his career. They've never stood in his way up to now. The fact that they are being brought up today in this way, and this unsparing way, strongly suggests to me that this is a plot, and it's a plot which is being driven by people with the two motives I've said.
Okay, so Sunak is using Cummings, I imagine, to gain power, because Cummings doesn't really have any connection, a formal connection to the government, does he?
No.
At this point in time?
He doesn't have a formal connection to the government. He doesn't have a formal connection to the Conservative Party. He's not even a member of the Conservative Party. This is the paradox about Cummings. He's been there on very heavily involved in Conservative politics. He was for a while a special advisor to Michael Gove, who was a Conservative minister. But at the moment, at present, he's not actually formally even a Conservative, and yet he plays a very active role in Conservative Party politics. So yes, he is a citizen, he is citizen Cummings, but he is nonetheless someone who must be seen as being heavily involved in Conservative politics and in Conservative political intrigues.
What Cummings is good for, the weight of his words is just held together from the fact that he was Boris Johnson's close aide. I mean, that's it at this point in time, is that fact. Why should the Conservative Party, of which Boris Johnson is a member of, and why should the UK population, the British people, care so much about this testimony from Cummings? I mean, when did he leave? Like a year and a half ago?
No.
I mean, why are they putting so much emphasis on this? Something else is going on. Something else is happening. I don't know. Something fishy.
Well, let's first of all start with your last point. Lots is going on. When these kind of things happen, especially at the top of the Conservative Party, you can be absolutely sure that all sorts of phones are ringing, meetings are taking place. The Conservative Party is a party which makes intrigue, it takes intrigue to the highest level. The court of the Borgias and Stalin's Kremlin were amateurs compared to Conservative Party plotting in England. I mean, and this bears all the hallmarks of that. Now, Cummings himself, I should say, I mean, yes, he was Johnson's chief advisor, so of course he knows an awful lot about what was going on within Johnson's government. He's also somebody who's a careful record keeper, that you've got to be always careful about saying that, because the records that he keeps are the records which he made, and of course those records can be adjusted, shall we say, to suit whatever narrative he particularly has. But anyway, he was close to Johnson. He has all that information. He is also a fairly well-known person in Britain, and the reason he's fairly well-known is that he was the campaign manager of Vote Leave. So he actually ran the campaign, and he came up with a slogan which became one of the key slogans during the Brexit 2016 referendum, which is "Take Back Control." It was his work. He came up with that phrase, which caught fire and became viral and became, if you like, almost the slogan that the pro-Brexit people adopted. And the anti-Brexit liberal media in Britain also worked very hard afterwards to build him up into a kind of very sinister Machiavellian figure. He's become almost a folk figure in some ways. He's appeared on, there's even been television dramas about him in which he's been played by Benedict Cumberbatch, who is the actor who plays Sherlock in some of these TV dramas. So he's actually quite well known to the British population. So, you know, he's not somebody who's come out of nowhere and is saying these things. And he was Johnson's chief advisor until the autumn, when, as I said, he was ousted. Having said that, your point about what political weight does he carry is absolutely spot on. If you're talking about the great British public, the people who, you know, work, go to their offices, live their lives and vote in elections, they don't care. They're not interested in what Dominic Cummings has to say. That isn't part of this at all. They are completely uninterested in that sort of thing. If you're talking about the rank and file, grassroots membership of the Conservative Party, they don't care either. As far as they're concerned, Boris Johnson won the election, gave the Conservatives it's now an 81-seat majority in the House of Commons, broke with Theresa May and got Brexit done. He has solid support there. The people who do care and who are interested in this and for whom this is all about is the political class in Westminster and in the media and the wire pullers at the top of the Conservative Party. But the Conservative Party is structured in such a way that wire pulling and plotting can be extremely effective. Bear in mind that Margaret Thatcher, a Prime Minister with much more stature than Boris Johnson, was ousted in exactly that way. So what happens is that there's plotting around the court of the King, Boris Johnson. He's suddenly removed. It's not done through an election. It's not done through, Margaret Thatcher didn't lose power because she lost an election. It's not done through, because there's a big uprising against the leader from the grassroots. It's because the powers at the top of the Conservative Party gang up against the leader and they're strong enough to oust him in some way. Now, Johnson is not going to go easily. He's going to put up a fight. He has supporters and allies. This thing that we're seeing at the moment is not going to displace him. He's going to remain Prime Minister for the time being. But it is weakening him, or at least it's sowing doubts and feeding suspicions. And Conservatives in Westminster now know that there is a powerful faction around Rishi Sunak which is manoeuvring to oust him. So every Conservative MP, every person who wants to be a Conservative MP knows that these factions are manoeuvring against each other and is going to start adjusting their positions in response to that. At the moment, Johnson is still in control, but the fact that he's been challenged in the way that he is shows that he's got a lot to worry about.
Okay, final question, and this is going to be a little bit of a jump, but let's throw it out there. Boris Johnson the other day said that the UK needs to get to the bottom of what happened in Wuhan. There's a lot of talk now, all of a sudden, and we'll probably do a video on this, all of a sudden everyone is talking about the lab in Wuhan. Do you think that statement saying that there needs to be an investigation as to what happened in that lab may be reason that some of this elite group is saying, okay, this guy has to go? Do you think maybe he went a little too far by perhaps antagonizing certain power bases?
That may have contributed to it, but I don't think it's the prime reason, because actually, if you've been tracking Conservative Party politics, it's been obvious that this plot has been building up for some time. There were already indications of it at least a month ago. We did a video about it, and it's now moved to a sort of higher gear. it was expected that the local elections, where the Conservatives did very well and the Labour Party was smashed, might actually reinforce Johnson's position. For some reason, it hasn't quite worked like that. On the contrary, it seems as if the Conservatives, or at least the Conservative leadership, because they're now very confident that whatever they do, then they're going to win the next election, are now even more willing to engage in this plotting than they might have been otherwise if there'd been a strong opposition. But I think that that is something that goes back a long time. It's important to make one point, though. Sunak himself is very much someone who is associated with the globalist wing of the Conservative Party. I think that's an important thing to say. Johnson is not. And that's one of the factors which I think is more in play. It's the sense that Johnson is something of a maverick, something of a person who is prepared to get very close to the people, somebody who emphasised during the period when he was running the Brexit campaign parliamentary sovereignty and things of that kind. Sunak is related to a billionaire. He's married to the wife of a billionaire. He's got very strong connections in the financial world. He's that kind of a person, and he comes from that sort of framework. He's more likely to get on with Joe Biden than Johnson is. And he belongs very much to that world of people. And that, I think, is a better reason for understanding what is going on.
All right. Well, we'll continue to monitor this, and very interesting party and palace intrigue. Guys, go to the Duran shop, use the code REALNEWS to get 10% off all merchandise. Super U, Locals, Odyssey, BitChute. Look for us on those platforms. Take care.